The darkness wasn't the worst part, it was the silence that followed when she thought he couldn't see her stealing from him. But Julian Prescott had learned to read betrayal in the weight of footsteps, the catch of breath, the rustle of fabric against greed. What he hadn't learned was how to read the trembling voice of the woman who'd just walked in and whispered, "I'm so sorry. I'll fix this." Welcome back to CJ Stories, where we bring you emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul. If you're just joining us for the first time, you're welcome to this wonderful big family. We're so glad to have you here. Please make sure to watch till the end, and if today's story moves you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and share this video with your family and loved ones. Now, let's dive into today's story. 6 months after the accident, Julian Prescott's world had become a symphony of sounds, each note telling him what his eyes no longer could. The grandfather clock in the hallway of his Boston penthouse ticked with a hollow echo, mahogany, pre-war construction, the kind that announced old money. His footsteps against Italian marble whispered precision and control, even now. The ventilation system hummed at exactly 62 decibels, a constant he'd measured and memorized because constants were all he had left. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor, feeling the morning sun warm his face, painting the darkness behind his eyelids a softer shade of black. Somewhere below, the city breathed and moved, indifferent to the fact that Julian Prescott, tech mogul and former golden boy of Silicon Valley's East Coast invasion, could no longer see it. "Your coffee, Mr. Prescott." Mrs. Chen's voice came from exactly 8 feet away, her sensible heels creating a distinct pattern he'd know anywhere. She'd been his housekeeper for 12 years, and she was one of the few people who hadn't changed her tone after the accident. No pity. No uncomfortable cheerfulness. Just steady, reliable Mrs. Chen. "Thank you." He turned, his movements calculated. 23 steps to the breakfast table. His fingers found the chair back, then the table's edge, then the coffee mug, always placed at 2 o'clock from his plate. Hot, black, no sugar. Some things remained blessedly simple. Ms. Whitmore called. "She'll be here at 10 for the wedding planning session." Mrs. Chen's voice carried something he'd learned to identify as carefully maintained neutrality. His housekeeper had opinions about his fiancée, Veronica Whitmore, but she was too professional to voice them. "Of course she will." Julian lifted the mug, inhaling the dark roast before sipping. Bitter. Perfect. Like everything else in his carefully controlled existence. Veronica. Beautiful, ambitious Veronica with her crystalline laugh and designer perfume that cost more per ounce than most people's monthly salary. They'd been engaged for 4 years, 3 before the accident that had stolen his sight in a corporate helicopter crash, 1 after. She'd stayed. That meant something, didn't it? Loyalty in the face of tragedy. Love that transcended the physical. Or so he told himself during the long, dark nights. The accident had taught him many things. How to navigate his penthouse using counted steps and memorized layouts. How to identify people by their breathing patterns and cologne. How to run a multi-billion-dollar tech empire through voice commands and assistants he trusted. How to recognize when someone was lying, their voice always changed, tightened, rose just half a pitch. Veronica's voice had been changing a lot lately. Will Ms. Whitmore be bringing her assistant again? Mrs. Chen asked, and Julian caught the slight emphasis on the word assistant. I assume so. Naomi helps with the wedding details. He set down his mug with precision. Why do you ask? No reason, sir. I'll prepare the sitting room. But there was a reason. Mrs. Chen didn't ask idle questions. Julian filed it away, another data point in the equation of his life that no longer quite added up. The next 2 hours passed in the routine that structured his days. His assistant, Gordon, arrived at 8:30 with a voice like gravel and footsteps heavy enough to register 3 seconds before he entered any room. They reviewed contracts using screen-reading software, discussed the quarterly reports, and made decisions that would affect thousands of employees who'd probably never know their CEO navigated board meetings by memory and sound alone. The Singapore deal is falling apart, Gordon said, his chair creaking, leather, the expensive kind that announced executive privilege. They're worried about leadership stability. Translation, they were worried about the blind CEO. Julian's jaw tightened. Schedule a video conference. I'll handle it personally. Julian. I said I'll handle it. His voice came out sharper than intended. The Singapore deal represented 18 months of work, $200 million in projected revenue, and the future of their AI division. He wouldn't lose it because some executives doubted a man who couldn't see. Gordon was quiet for a moment. The team believes in you. You know that. But the shareholders are getting nervous. Julian didn't phrase it as a question. He'd heard the whispers in board meetings, felt the tension in conference calls. How long before blindness became liability? How long before someone called for new leadership? Marry Veronica, Gordon said bluntly. The wedding will stabilize things. Show them you're moving forward, not stuck in the past. A beautiful wife, a united front, it's good optics. Optics. The word tasted like ashes. Julian had built his fortune on vision, literally and figuratively. Now his company's future depended on the vision of a marriage that felt more like a business merger than a love story. She's late, Julian observed. His internal clock, honed by months of dependency, told him it was 10:17. Veronica was never late. Veronica believed punctuality was power. As if summoned by his thoughts, the elevator chimed. Private access, restricted to only a handful of people. Veronica's heels clicked against the marble, sharp, staccato, expensive stilettos that announced her presence like a drumbeat. But there was a second set of footsteps. Softer. Hesitant. Sneakers, maybe, or flats. The assistant. Darling. Veronica's voice preceded her perfume, Chanel No. 5, applied liberally. She kissed the air beside his cheek. He felt the breeze of it but not the warmth. I'm sorry we're late. Traffic was absolutely murderous. She was lying. Her voice had that tightness, that half-pitch rise. But why lie about traffic? Julian, you remember Naomi, don't you? My best friend from college? She's been absolutely invaluable with the wedding planning. Of course. Julian extended his hand in the general direction of the second set of footsteps. Naomi. A hand took his, small, warm, trembling slightly. Mr. Prescott. It's nice to see you again. Her voice was different from Veronica's. Softer, with a slight rasp that suggested either nervousness or a natural huskiness. No expensive finishing school polish. Something genuine. Something that made him want to hear her speak again. Please, call me Julian. He released her hand, noting the calluses on her palm. Someone who worked with her hands. Someone real. Naomi's been helping me with everything, Veronica continued, her heels clicking as she moved deeper into the room. The flowers, the venue, the guest list. I simply couldn't do it without her. What do you think? Can love survive when the eyes that once saw everything now see nothing at all? Drop your thoughts below. Julian listened as they settled into the sitting room, tracking their movements by sound. Veronica's confident stride to the cream leather sofa, her favorite, positioned to catch the afternoon light she loved. Naomi's more tentative steps, a slight shuffle that suggested uncertainty or discomfort. So, Veronica began, and Julian heard papers rustling. I've made decisions about the final details. The ceremony will be at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, obviously. 500 guests. I've chosen the Vera Wang dress, the one with the cathedral train. And the honeymoon will be 2 weeks in Bora Bora. Julian noticed she hadn't phrased any of it as a question. Decisions made, not discussed. Another thing that had changed since the accident, or perhaps it had always been this way, and he simply hadn't been paying attention. That sounds extensive, he said carefully. We're only getting married once, darling. It needs to be perfect. Her voice held a brittle edge, like crystal about to shatter. Don't you want it to be perfect? What he wanted was to see her face, to read the expression that matched that tone. What he wanted was to understand when his fiancé had become a stranger who spoke in declarations instead of conversations. Of course, he said, because it was easier than the truth. Veronica, Naomi's voice cut in softly, didn't you want to ask Julian about the vows? Whether he wanted to write his own or use traditional ones. Julian's attention sharpened. Here was someone asking him what he wanted. Here was someone who remembered he had a voice in his own wedding. Oh, right. Veronica's tone suggested she'd forgotten entirely. What do you think, Julian? Traditional or personal? He opened his mouth to respond, but Veronica's phone chimed, a sound he'd learned to recognize, a specific ringtone she reserved for someone important. I have to take this, she said abruptly. Wedding photographer emergency. Naomi, go over the rest with Julian, would you? I'll just be a moment. Her heels clicked rapidly toward the hallway, and then came the soft whoosh of the balcony door opening and closing. Taking the call outside. Private. Another data point that didn't add up. Silence filled the room, heavy and expectant. Julian heard Naomi shift in her seat, the soft rustle of fabric, cotton, probably, not the silk or designer materials Veronica favored. He caught a scent too, different from Veronica's expensive perfume. Something lighter. Vanilla? Or maybe cocoa butter. Something that reminded him of warmth and simplicity. Mr. Prescott, Julian, She paused, and he heard her take a breath. I need to tell you something. The tremor in her voice set his instincts on alert. This wasn't about flowers or guest lists. This was something else. Something important. I'm listening. I don't think I should be here. The words came out in a rush. I mean, I'm helping with the wedding, but it feels wrong. Everything about this feels wrong, and I can't keep pretending. The balcony door opened. Veronica's heels, returning at speed. Sorry about that. She breezed back into the room, and Julian felt the temperature drop with her presence. Crisis averted. Now, where were we? Naomi was just, Julian began. Actually, I have all the information I need, Veronica interrupted smoothly. Julian, you just need to show up and look handsome. Leave the rest to me and Naomi. We'll make it perfect. Perfect. That word again. But perfection wasn't measured in designer dresses and 500 guest ceremonies. Perfection was supposed to be about love, about partnership, about two people choosing each other every day. Wasn't it? The meeting continued for another hour, Veronica narrating decisions she'd made, Naomi mostly silent except for soft confirmations or gentle suggestions that Veronica usually overrode. Julian tracked Naomi's breathing. It kept hitching, like she wanted to say something but couldn't. He tracked Veronica's movements, constantly in motion, restless, her attention divided. And he tracked his own heartbeat, steady and resigned, counting down to a wedding that felt more like an execution. When they finally left, he sat in the silence of his penthouse and wondered when he'd become so passive in his own life. The accident had taken his sight, yes. But somewhere along the way, he'd let it take his voice too. Mr. Prescott? Mrs. Chen's distinctive footsteps approached. Will you have lunch? Not hungry. He stood, orienting himself toward his study. 27 steps from the sitting room. He knew the way. Sir. Mrs. Chen's voice stopped him. Permission to speak freely? Julian paused. Always. That girl, Naomi. She's good people. The way she looks at Ms. Whitmore, there's worry there. And the way she looked at you. A pause. Well, maybe some things are worth seeing, even when you can't. Before Julian could respond, she'd retreated, leaving him with words that settled like stones in his chest. The rest of the day blurred into conference calls and market reports, but Julian couldn't shake the memory of Naomi's trembling voice saying, everything about this feels wrong. Julian's private gym occupied the penthouse's eastern wing, 1,500 square feet of equipment he'd memorized down to the last weight plate. His trainer, Marcus, no, he needed to call him something else. His trainer, Kevin, had mapped everything for him, creating a space where Julian could push his body as hard as he once pushed his mind. He was mid-rep on the bench press, muscles burning, when he heard the elevator chime. Unscheduled. His security system should have alerted him to any visitor. He set the bar in its cradle and sat up, listening. Light footsteps. Not Veronica, these were even softer, more hesitant. Not Mrs. Chen, wrong rhythm. Hello, he called out. Mr. Prescott? Julian? I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't be here. Naomi's voice, tight with anxiety. But I couldn't. I can't let this go on. Julian grabbed his towel, wiping sweat from his face. His heart rate, already elevated from exercise, kicked up another notch. How did you get past security? I still had the access code from earlier. Veronica gave it to me for the wedding planning. She moved closer, he tracked her by sound. 6 feet away. 5. I'll give it back. I'll leave. But first, you need to know the truth. The tremor in her voice had evolved into something sharper. Determination. Fear. Guilt. What truth? A long exhale, shaky. Veronica's been stealing from you. The words hung in the air like smoke. Julian's mind raced, processing, analyzing. Explain. She's been using your accounts. Small amounts at first, things she thought you wouldn't notice. But it's gotten bigger. Designer clothes, jewelry, a condo in Miami you don't know about. She's been forging your signature, well, getting your biometric authorizations while you sleep. The words came faster now, spilling out like a confession. She has someone on your staff helping her. I don't know who. But I found the statements, the transfer records. She kept them in her apartment, and You went through her things. Not a question. Julian's voice was flat, emotionless, while his insides twisted. I know how that sounds. I know what that makes me. But I've watched her manipulate you for months, and I couldn't stand it anymore. She's not who you think she is, Julian. She's not who anyone thinks she is. Julian stood, orienting toward her voice. Why should I believe you? You're her best friend. You've been helping her plan a wedding. Now you show up here with accusations. Because it's true. The anguish in her voice struck him like a physical blow. Because I've been complicit in this nightmare, and I can't sleep at night. Because every time I see you trust her, believe her lies, plan a future with her, I feel sick. Because... She stopped abruptly. Julian heard her breathing, rapid and shallow. Because what? He asked softly. Because you deserve better, she whispered. Because nobody's looking out for you. Because everyone in your life either wants something from you or is too afraid to tell you the truth. And you're different? Skepticism sharpened his words. You're not here with an agenda? A best friend who betrays her friend's confidence, breaks into my home. I'm here because I can't watch this anymore. Her voice cracked. Fire me. Hate me. Call security and have me arrested. But check your accounts first. Look at the transfers to offshore accounts in the Caymans. Look at the property records in Miami under her name. Look at the jewelry receipts from Cartier and Harry Winston that you never authorized. I'm not lying, Julian. I wish I was. Silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Julian's analytical mind warred with his emotions. Veronica, stealing from him? It seemed absurd. But then again, so many things had seemed absurd lately. The changed voice. The strange distances. The wedding that felt more like a performance than a celebration. I have documentation, Naomi said quietly. I made copies. They're in my bag. I'll leave them with you, and then I'll go. You never have to see me again. I can't see you now, Julian said, and immediately regretted the bitterness in his tone. I know. Her voice softened. I'm sorry. That was thoughtless of me. Don't. He held up a hand. Don't pity me. Everyone pities me. I don't pity you. She said it with such quiet conviction that he almost believed her. I think you're brilliant and strong and you've survived something that would have destroyed most people. But I also think you're being played by someone who sees your blindness as an opportunity, not a challenge to support you through. Julian's hands clenched into fists. Leave the documents. I'll have them reviewed. Okay. He heard rustling, her bag, probably. Footsteps moving closer. I'm putting them on the bench beside you. 3 o'clock position. His fingers found the manila envelope. Thick. Heavy with damning evidence or elaborate lies. Naomi. He spoke before she could leave. Why? Why tell me this? Why risk your friendship, your involvement in the wedding? What do you gain? For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, maybe the chance to look myself in the mirror again. Her footsteps retreated. The elevator chimed. And Julian was left alone with an envelope full of accusations and a heart full of dread. Julian didn't call Gordon. He didn't call his lawyers. Instead, he called someone he'd been avoiding for months, his brother, Christopher Prescott, the FBI's white-collar crime specialist. Jules? Christopher's voice carried surprise and concern. It's midnight. What's wrong? I need you to investigate someone. Julian's voice was steady, cold. Quietly. Thoroughly. Veronica Whitmore. And I need it done yesterday. Your fiancé? Julian, what? Can you do it or not? A pause. Then, I'll be there in an hour. Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone. And Jules? Whatever this is. I'm glad you called. Julian hung up and sat in the darkness of his study, the envelope beside him, Naomi's words echoing in his mind. You deserve better. The worst part? A treacherous corner of his heart had started to believe her. But before Christopher could arrive, Julian's phone rang. Veronica. Her voice was honey-sweet and venomous. Darling, we need to talk. It seems my best friend paid you a little visit tonight. Whatever lies she told you. She's jealous, unstable, and about to be very, very sorry she crossed me. The line went dead. And Julian realized he wasn't the only one in danger. Christopher Prescott arrived in 47 minutes, not an hour. Julian tracked his approach by the distinctive rumble of his brother's vintage Mustang in the parking garage, the aggressive footfalls that spoke of military training and urgency, the sharp knock that was both warning and announcement. It's open, Julian called from his study. The door swung wide. Christopher's presence filled the room. He'd always been larger than life, the older brother who'd chosen public service over private wealth, who'd walked away from the family business to chase criminals instead of profits. Talk to me. Christopher's voice was all business now, the familiar warmth stripped away. This was Special Agent Prescott, not Big Brother Chris. Julian slid the envelope across his desk. A woman named Naomi Clark came to see me tonight. She claims Veronica has been embezzling from my accounts. The evidence is in there. He heard Christopher move, papers rustling as he examined the documents. The silence stretched, 30 seconds, 45, a full minute. Julian's chest tightened with each passing second. Jesus Christ, Christopher finally breathed. Jules, this is. How long has this been going on? You tell me. I can't exactly read financial statements anymore. Don't. Christopher's voice sharpened. Don't do that self-pity thing. You've been running a billion-dollar company blind for 6 months. You're the smartest person I know. So right now, I need that brain working. Julian exhaled slowly. Since the accident. Maybe before. I don't know. The evidence here suggests at least 18 months. We're talking about nearly $4 million, jewels, properties, jewelry, cash transfers to offshore accounts. And if this Naomi is right about someone on your staff being involved. Christopher paused. We're looking at conspiracy, fraud, possibly identity theft. This is federal. $4 million. The number should have shocked him, but instead Julian felt a strange numbness settling over him like fog. $4 million, and he hadn't noticed. Or had he? Had there been signs he'd ignored, dismissed, rationalized away? I need to talk to this Naomi Clark, Christopher said. Get her statement, verify her involvement, understand how she obtained this information. She's Veronica's best friend. They went to college together. She's been helping with the wedding planning. And she just decided to blow the whistle out of the goodness of her heart? Christopher's skepticism was palpable. Jules, that doesn't happen. People don't risk everything without a reason. What's her angle? Julian remembered Naomi's trembling voice, maybe the chance to look myself in the mirror again. I don't know, he admitted. But Veronica called after Naomi left. She knew about the visit. She warned me that Naomi was jealous and unstable. Of course she did. Classic misdirection. Christopher's chair creaked as he sat. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to call in a favor, get a forensic accountant on this tonight. We'll need to freeze your accounts, set up monitoring, trace every transaction. This is going to get messy, Jules. Veronica will lawyer up the second she knows we're looking. But first, I need to secure the witness. Naomi. Julian's hands tightened on his desk. Veronica threatened her. Then we move fast. Christopher was already on his phone, making calls, issuing orders in the clipped tone of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. But Julian barely heard him. His mind was replaying every interaction with Veronica since the accident. The way she'd insisted on handling his finances, let me help, darling. You have enough to worry about. The expensive gifts she'd given him that he'd assumed came from her own wealth. The trips she'd taken alone because you need to focus on recovery, not vacation planning. How long had he been the blind man in every sense of the word? The address, Christopher said, pulling Julian from his thoughts. I need Naomi Clark's address. I don't have it. Julian's jaw clenched. I don't even know her last name beyond Clark. Veronica never. I never asked. The admission hung in the air, heavy with implications. He was marrying a woman whose best friend he knew nothing about. A woman whose life he'd never really examined. A woman who, apparently, had been robbing him blind. The irony wasn't lost on him. I'll find her, Christopher said grimly. DMV records, social media, employment history. Give me an hour. But they didn't have an hour. Julian's phone rang, the sharp, insistent tone he'd assigned to his building's security desk. Mr. Prescott. Derek, the night guard, his voice tight with tension. Sir, we have a situation. A woman just entered the parking garage. She had a resident code, but she's behaving erratically. She's asking for you, but she seems distressed. Should I call the police? What woman? But Julian already knew. He could feel it in his gut. She says her name is Naomi Clark. Sir, there's blood on her hands. Julian was moving before Derek finished speaking, Christopher right behind him. The elevator ride down to the parking garage took 47 seconds. Julian counted each one, his mind racing through possibilities, each worse than the last. The elevator doors opened to chaos. You don't understand. Naomi's voice, raw and desperate. He needs to know. She's going to. Ma'am, you need to calm down. Derek, trying for authoritative but landing on nervous. Step aside. Christopher's command cut through the confusion. Federal agent. I'll handle this. Julian followed his brother's voice, his cane sweeping ahead of him, until he heard Naomi's ragged breathing 6 feet away. Naomi. He kept his voice level, calm. It's Julian. Tell me what happened. She knows. The words came out between gasps. Veronica knows I told you. She came to my apartment. She had someone with her, a man, big, he didn't speak. She said I had 48 hours to recant everything, to tell you I made it all up. She said if I didn't. A shaky breath. She showed me pictures, Julian. Pictures of my sister. My 9-year-old niece. She knows where they live. She knows everything. Christopher was suddenly all motion. The blood. Are you hurt? No. It's not. I cut my hand on broken glass when I was climbing out my fire escape. She had someone watching my building. I barely got away. Describe the man who was with Veronica, Christopher demanded. 6'2", 6'3". White guy, shaved head, neck tattoo, looked like barbed wire. He didn't say anything, just stood there cracking his knuckles. He knew how to intimidate. Julian heard Christopher cursing under his breath, followed by rapid-fire phone calls. I need a unit at. He rattled off an address. Protective custody for a witness. Now. And I need to put out a bolo on Veronica Whitmore. Wait. Julian held up a hand. Chris, if you go after her now, she'll know we're moving. She'll destroy evidence, flee, do whatever she needs to protect herself. She threatened a witness. She's escalating. This has gone beyond financial crimes, Jules. This is witness intimidation, possibly assault. Which means we need to be smart. Julian's mind was working now, clicking through scenarios like he was back in the boardroom. Naomi, where are your sister and niece? Atlanta. They're in Atlanta. Her voice cracked. Veronica showed me their school, their house, where my sister works. She has people down there. She said accidents happen to little girls who aren't careful. Rage, white-hot and blinding, surged through Julian's chest. He'd been many things in his life, ruthless in business, calculating in negotiations, cold when necessary. But threatening a child? That was a line that, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. Christopher, get them into protective custody. Tonight. Now. Already on it. Christopher was typing furiously. Julian heard the rapid-fire clicks of a keyboard. Atlanta field office will have agents at their location within the hour. But Jules, we need to move on Veronica. If she's willing to threaten a child, then we give her what she wants. Julian's voice was ice. We make her think she's one. Silence. Then Christopher, carefully, what are you thinking? Naomi recants. Tells me she was jealous, made it all up. I believe her, or pretend to. Veronica thinks she's safe. Meanwhile, you build your case quietly. Forensic accounting, wire transfers, property records. Everything you need to make charges stick. And when you have her dead to rights, you move. That could take weeks. Months, even. Christopher's skepticism was clear. So we buy time. Julian turned toward Naomi's voice. Can you do that? Can you pretend to back down? For a long moment, she didn't answer. Julian heard her breathing, shallow, rapid, the sound of fear and exhaustion. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. She'll hurt them. If I don't do exactly what she wants, she'll hurt my family. No. Julian's voice was absolute. Christopher will protect them. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Another pause. Then, so quietly, I don't even know you. I know. And wasn't that the tragedy of it all? This woman had risked everything for him, her friendship, her safety, her family's security, and they were strangers. But you came to me tonight. You told me the truth when everyone else was lying. That has to mean something. He heard her exhale, shaky and uncertain. What if she doesn't believe me? What if she knows I'm lying? Then we'll deal with it. Christopher's voice was firm. But right now, your sister and niece are being secured. By morning, they'll be in a safe house under federal protection. Veronica Whitmore won't be able to touch them. You promise? The vulnerability in Naomi's voice made Julian's chest ache. I promise, Christopher said. And then, softer, I've been doing this for 15 years. I don't make promises I can't keep. Julian heard Naomi move, a step forward, maybe two. Then her hand found his arm, her touch light and hesitant. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry I brought this to your door. You didn't bring it. Julian covered her hand with his. Her skin was cold, trembling. Veronica did. You just had the courage to shine a light on it. They went back upstairs, Christopher, Naomi, and Julian. Derek, the security guard, was paid well for his discretion and loyalty, and he'd earned every penny tonight. In Julian's penthouse, with the city lights blazing beyond windows Julian couldn't see, they made their plan. Mrs. Chen appeared with coffee and first aid supplies without being asked, her presence a steady calm in the storm. She tended to Naomi's cut hand with efficient gentleness while Christopher worked his phone, coordinating with agents in Atlanta, Boston, and God knew where else. Julian sat at his desk, listening, processing, planning. This was familiar territory, crisis management, strategic thinking, outmaneuvering an opponent. The fact that the opponent was his fiancé should have devastated him. Instead, he felt something else. Clarity. Purpose. Anger that burned clean and cold. Your sister and niece are secure. Christopher's announcement cut through the tension. They're asking questions, but they're safe. Atlanta PD has eyes on Veronica's known associates down there. No one's getting close. Julian heard Naomi's sob of relief, muffled like she was trying to hold it back. Thank you, she managed. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. We're just getting started. Christopher's chair creaked. Here's how this plays out. Tomorrow morning, Naomi, you're going to call Veronica. Tell her you panicked, that you're sorry, that you were jealous and made everything up. You'll beg her forgiveness. She'll want reassurance, she'll probably demand you come see her, recant to Julian in person. You'll do it. I'll be wired, Naomi said quietly. It wasn't a question. Every second. And I'll have agents positioned within response distance. She makes a move, says anything incriminating, we're there. Christopher paused. But Jules, this is where it gets complicated for you. I have to believe her. Julian understood. I have to act like nothing's changed. Like I trust Veronica completely. Can you do that? Christopher asked. Can you look at a woman who's been stealing from you, who threatened a child, and pretend everything's fine? Julian thought about the month since the accident. The careful performance of normalcy he'd maintained. The board meetings where he'd hidden every moment of uncertainty. The social events where he'd smiled and charmed while internally mapping every exit, counting every step, tracking every voice. I've been acting blind for 6 months, he said flatly. I think I can manage acting stupid. What would you do if someone you loved turned out to be your greatest betrayer? Would you confront them or play the long game? Share your thoughts below. There's one more thing. Naomi's voice cut through the planning. Veronica isn't working alone. Someone on your staff is helping her, someone with access to your biometrics, your accounts, your schedule. Someone you trust. The words landed like a punch. Julian had considered the possibility abstractly, but hearing it stated so plainly made it real. Someone in his inner circle, Gordon, Mrs. Chen, Kevin his trainer, any of the dozen people he relied on daily, was a traitor. Do you know who? Christopher asked. No. But I know Veronica. She doesn't get her hands dirty if she can help it. She needs a facilitator, someone who can move money and forge authorizations without raising flags. Someone smart enough to cover their tracks. Someone who knows Julian can't see what they're doing, Christopher added grimly. The room fell silent. Julian felt the weight of it, the violation, the betrayal, the fundamental trust that had been weaponized against him. We'll find them, Christopher said. But right now, we focus on Veronica. She's the key. We flip her world upside down, she might give up her accomplice for a deal. Or she doubles down and disappears, Naomi countered. She has offshore accounts, properties outside the U.S. If she runs, she won't run. Julian's voice cut through the debate. Not yet. She's too close to the finish line. What finish line? Christopher asked. The wedding. Once we're married, she has access to everything. Not just what she's already stolen, but the entire Prescott fortune. Community property, spousal rights, legal protections. Right now, she's a thief. After the wedding, she's an heiress. The implications hung heavy in the air. Veronica wasn't just stealing, she was positioning herself for the ultimate score. And Julian had been walking straight into the trap, blind in every way that mattered. Then we move up the timeline, Christopher decided. We can't wait months to build a case. We have maybe weeks before she suspects something's wrong. Or days, Naomi added quietly. She was rattled tonight. Desperate people make mistakes, but they also get dangerous. Julian stood, orienting himself toward the windows. He could feel the morning sun starting to warm the glass. Dawn was coming, bringing with it a day that would require the performance of his life. Naomi, you should rest. Mrs. Chen will prepare the guest room. I can go home, Naomi started. Your apartment was compromised tonight, Christopher interrupted. You're staying here until we secure it. Non-negotiable. He's right. Julian turned back toward her voice. You're not safe out there. Not yet. He heard her hesitate, then acquiesce with a tired, okay. Thank you. Mrs. Chen materialized. Julian swore the woman had a sixth sense for when she was needed, and led Naomi away. Her footsteps faded, leaving Julian alone with his brother. You okay? Christopher asked once they were alone. Define okay. Jules. I was going to marry her. The words came out flat, emotionless. In 3 weeks, I was going to stand in front of 500 people and promise my life to a woman who's been robbing me. Who threatened a child. Who saw my blindness as an opportunity instead of a challenge. I know. Do you? Julian laughed, bitter and sharp. Do you know what it's like to realize that every touch, every kiss, every I love you was just part of a con? That the woman who held my hand through surgery and recovery was calculating how much she could steal while I couldn't see. Christopher was quiet for a long moment. Then, no. I don't know what that's like. But I know you, Jules. And I know you're going to channel this rage into something productive. You're going to take her down so completely she'll wish she'd never heard the name Prescott. Damn right I am. But first, you need to sleep. You've got a performance to give tomorrow, and you need to be sharp. Julian knew his brother was right, but sleep felt impossible. His mind was racing, analyzing, planning. Somewhere in his organization was a traitor. Somewhere in the city was a woman who'd thought she could play him for a fool. And somewhere in this mess was Naomi Clark, a woman he barely knew but who'd risked everything to tell him the truth. "Chris," Julian said as his brother moved toward the door. "The woman, Naomi. What does she look like?" Christopher paused. Julian heard the smile in his voice when he answered. "Why? You planning to see her somehow?" "Just tell me. About 5'6", maybe 5'7". Black woman, brown skin, natural hair. Looks like she's wearing it in some kind of twists or braids. I'm not great with hair terminology. Late 20s, early 30s maybe. Pretty. Really pretty, actually, even exhausted and scared. She's got these eyes that..." Christopher trailed off. "She's got kind eyes, Jules. Sad, but kind. Like she's seen hard things but hasn't let them make her hard." Julian absorbed this, creating a picture in his mind from fragments and imagination. "Thanks," he said quietly. "Jules." Christopher's voice was serious now. "Be careful with this one. She's neck-deep in a federal investigation, and she's connected to Veronica. Whatever you're thinking." "I'm not thinking anything. I just wanted to know." "Sure." Christopher didn't sound convinced. "Get some sleep. I'll be back at 8 with updates on Atlanta and the forensic accounting. We'll need to coordinate your story with Naomi's before she makes that call to Veronica." After Christopher left, Julian stood alone in his study, listening to the city wake up beyond his windows. Somewhere out there, Veronica was probably sleeping soundly, confident in her control, certain of her victory. Somewhere else, maybe lying awake in his guest room, was a woman who'd thrown a grenade into that confidence. And Julian? Julian was done being the blind victim in his own life. He pulled out his phone, activating the voice assistant. "Call Gordon." His assistant answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep. "Julian? It's not even 6 yet. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right for the first time in months." Julian's voice was cold steel. "I need you to set up a meeting. Today. Every department head, every executive with access to my accounts or authorization protocols. Conference room, noon. Non-negotiable attendance." That's highly irregular. "May I ask what this is about?" Julian smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. "Due diligence, Gordon. Just some routine due diligence. Nothing to worry about. Unless you're guilty," he didn't add. "Unless you're the one who's been helping my fiancé rob me blind." "Of course. I'll send the invites immediately." "Excellent. And Gordon? This meeting is confidential. If word gets out, if anyone, especially Veronica, hears about it before it happens, I'll know who leaked it." A pause. "Understood." Julian hung up and stood in the darkness of his study, feeling the first real surge of power he'd felt since the accident. He couldn't see, but he could strategize. He couldn't read faces, but he could read voices, breathing patterns, the subtle tells of people under pressure. Veronica had made a critical mistake. She'd underestimated the blind man. It was a mistake she'd only make once. At 6:47 a.m., Julian's phone rang. "Veronica." He let it ring 3 times, not too eager, not suspicious, before answering. "Good morning, darling." Her voice was honey-sweet, normal, like last night's threat had never happened. "I hope I didn't wake you. I've been up for hours. You know I don't sleep well." "Still having those nightmares?" Synthetic concern dripped from her words. "Poor baby. Listen, I wanted to apologize for last night. I was harsh about Naomi. She's just going through some things. Jealousy, instability. You know how complicated female friendships can be." "I don't, actually." Julian kept his voice neutral. "But I trust you to handle it. That's my Julian. Always so understanding." A pause. "She hasn't tried to contact you, has she?" "She's been acting erratically. If she does reach out, I'd appreciate a heads up. I'm worried about her mental state." Translation: "Tell me if she contacts you so I can shut her down." "She came to see me last night," Julian said, and felt a savage satisfaction at Veronica's sharp intake of breath. "She told me some wild story about you embezzling money. Quite the imagination she has." The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. 4. 5. "She what?" Veronica's voice climbed half an octave, shock or performance? Julian couldn't tell anymore. "Don't worry. I didn't believe her. The evidence she showed me was clearly fabricated. I told her to leave and not come back. I thought you should know, in case she tries to cause more trouble." "Oh, Julian." Veronica's relief sounded genuine. "Thank God you saw through it. She's been obsessed with our relationship, with you, for months. I should have seen this coming. I'm so sorry she put you through that. It's not your fault. But Veronica? Maybe we should distance ourselves from her. For both our sakes." "Absolutely. I'll handle it." I'll make sure she understands she's not welcome in our lives anymore. The steel beneath the sweetness was unmistakable. You just focus on work, darling. I'll take care of everything else. You always do, Julian said, and meant it in ways she'd never understand. After he hung up, he sat very still, listening to his own heartbeat, wondering how he'd ever thought he was in love with that voice. Then his phone rang again. Christopher, urgent. Jules, we have a problem. One of Veronica's known associates just boarded a plane to Atlanta. We're monitoring, but... In the background, Julian heard shouting. An alarm. Christopher cursing. Chris? What's happening? Your penthouse. Someone's coming up in the private elevator. They overrode the security. Jules, get Naomi and get to the panic room. Now. The line went dead as the elevator chimed. The doors opened to reveal footsteps Julian didn't recognize, heavy, purposeful, multiple sets. And Veronica's voice, cold and sharp. Hello, darling. We need to have a conversation about your new house guest. Julian's mind calculated distances in microseconds. 23 steps to the panic room behind his study's bookshelf. Naomi was in the guest wing, 47 steps from his current position, around 2 corners, past the kitchen. He'd never make it to her before Veronica's people did. But he could buy her time. Veronica. Julian turned toward her voice, keeping his own carefully modulated, surprised but not alarmed, confused but not defensive. What are you doing here? How did you override my security? Don't insult me with fake confusion, Julian. Her heels clicked across his marble floor, not her usual confident stride but something harder, faster. Angry. Where is she? Where is who? Don't play games. The crack in her voice revealed how close to the edge she was. Naomi. I know she's here. She used her access card at 11:43 p.m. and never left. My contact in building security confirmed it. Derek. The night guard. Either compromised or replaced. Julian filed that information away while his mind raced through options. She came to apologize, Julian said calmly. For the accusations. She admitted she made everything up out of jealousy. She was quite distraught, actually. I had Mrs. Chen prepare the guest room so she could rest before going home. Is that a problem? You believed her? Veronica's skepticism was sharp as glass. Just like that, you believed she fabricated everything? Should I have believed her wild accusations instead? Julian tilted his head, letting confusion color his voice. She claimed you were embezzling from me, Veronica. It was obviously a desperate attempt to drive us apart. Unless... He paused, as if a thought had just occurred. Unless you think there was truth to what she said? The silence was heavy, dangerous. Julian tracked Veronica's breathing, rapid, shallow, the sound of someone trying to control their temper. And beneath it, other sounds. At least 2 other people in his penthouse. One by the elevator, blocking the exit. Another moving. Julian tracked the footsteps, toward the guest wing. Toward Naomi. Of course there's no truth to it, Veronica finally said, her voice regaining its smooth control. But Naomi is clearly unstable. For your safety, for our safety, I need to take her somewhere she can get help. Help? Julian injected concern into his voice. What kind of help? Psychiatric evaluation. She's having a breakdown, Julian. Making wild accusations, probably paranoid delusions. I've already contacted a private facility. They're sending someone to collect her. Translation: Veronica was going to make Naomi disappear. Claim she was mentally unstable, lock her away somewhere no one would hear her accusations. It was elegant, really. Diabolical, but elegant. That seems extreme. Julian moved as he spoke, angling toward the study. Perhaps we should just call her family. Her family is in Atlanta, and they're dealing with their own crisis. Veronica's voice was silk over steel. A gas leak at their home. They had to evacuate. Quite serious, actually. They're staying with neighbors while it's being investigated. The threat was unmistakable. I can reach her family anytime I want. Back down, or they pay the price. Julian's hands clenched into fists. A gas leak? That's terrible. Are they safe? For now. These things can be so unpredictable, can't they? One wrong spark. She let the implication hang. Where the hell was Christopher? Julian's mind raced. His brother knew about the security breach, would be mobilizing FBI response, but how fast could they get here? 5 minutes? 10? How long could Julian stall? A crash from the guest wing. Glass breaking. Naomi's scream, sharp and terrified, cut short. Stop! Julian moved without thinking, his cane sweeping ahead of him as he rushed toward the sound. Don't hurt her. Strong hands grabbed his arms, the person by the elevator, moving fast. Julian felt himself being pulled back, held in place. Let him go. Veronica's voice, closer now. Let him go, Marcus. Marcus. The enforcer. The man with the neck tattoo who'd been at Naomi's apartment. Julian filed away the name even as fury surged through his chest. The hands released him. Julian stood still, every muscle coiled, listening. Footsteps returning from the guest wing. Heavier than before, someone carrying a burden. Naomi. Unconscious or restrained? What did you do to her? Julian demanded. Just a mild sedative. She'll be fine. Veronica was directly in front of him now. He could smell her perfume, Chanel No. 5, the scent that used to comfort him, now making his stomach turn. She needs rest, professional help. In a few days, when she's calmer, she'll realize how confused she was. How her jealousy made her imagine things that weren't real. And if she doesn't? Then she'll stay where she is until she does. Simple. Final. Terrifying. Julian heard movement, Marcus carrying Naomi toward the elevator. He had seconds to decide. Let them take her, trust Christopher to intercept them downstairs? Or make a move now, risk everything on a blind man's gamble? Then he heard it. The faintest sound, barely perceptible. Naomi's voice, weak but defiant. Julian, don't believe her. The elevator chimed. They were leaving. Taking Naomi to whatever facility Veronica had arranged, probably not a hospital, probably somewhere private, somewhere people could be kept quiet for as long as Veronica needed. Veronica. Julian kept his voice level. Before you go, I need to ask you something. Her heels clicked, irritated, impatient. What? Did you ever love me? Even a little bit? The question hung in the air. Julian tracked her breathing, the slight rustle of expensive fabric as she shifted weight. Love? She laughed, bitter and sharp. Julian, I loved the man you were. Brilliant, visionary, powerful. The golden boy of tech who could see 5 moves ahead of everyone else. But that man died in a helicopter crash. What's left? A blind man playing CEO, pretending he's still in control while the world moves on without him. Each word was a knife, precisely placed. But Julian had learned to function through pain. I see. He paused. So the engagement, the wedding plans, the last year, all of it was just positioning yourself for the payout? Don't be so dramatic. I earned every dollar I took. Do you know what it's like, playing nursemaid to someone who can't even find his own bathroom? Pretending to plan a future with a man who has no future? I deserve compensation for my time. And the threats to Naomi's family? Kidnapping her? You deserve that too. I deserve not to go to prison because your little hero complex made you listen to a jealous woman's lies. Veronica's voice was ice. Naomi will recant. Her family will be safe. And you'll forget this ever happened. Because Julian, blind or not, you're still smart enough to know that if you fight me on this, everyone loses. Your company's reputation, your board's confidence, your precious independence, all of it goes public. Blind CEO embezzled by his own fiancé makes quite a headline. She was right. The scandal would be devastating. Board members already nervous about his leadership would use it as ammunition for removal. Competitors would circle like sharks. Shareholders would panic. Everything he'd built, maintained, fought for, all of it at risk. But then Julian thought about Naomi's trembling voice, you deserve better. About her risking everything to tell him the truth. About a 9-year-old girl in Atlanta whose only crime was having an aunt brave enough to speak up. You're right, Julian said slowly. Fighting you would cost me everything. Veronica's voice brightened with triumph. Finally, you're being sensible. But I'm going to do it anyway. Silence. Then, dangerously quiet, what did you say? I said I'm going to destroy you, Veronica. Completely. Utterly. So thoroughly that when I'm done, you'll wish you'd never heard the name Prescott. He felt her move closer, her breath on his face. When she spoke, her voice was venomous. You're blind, Julian. You have no evidence. Naomi will recant or disappear. And you have no idea how deep my reach goes. People on your staff, in your company, in your life, people you trust. You don't even know who to trust anymore. You're right again. I don't know who to trust. Julian smiled, cold and sharp. Except for one thing. The FBI has known about you for the past 6 hours. Every account you've touched, every transfer you've made, every property you've purchased, they have it all. And this conversation? He tilted his head. The wire I'm wearing is picking up every word. The intake of breath was sharp, sudden. You're lying. Am I? You want to bet $4 million and 20 years in federal prison on that? Marcus. Veronica's voice was shrill now. Check him. Check him now. Heavy footsteps approached. Hands grabbed Julian's shirt, rough and invasive, searching. Julian stood still, letting it happen, counting the seconds. Christopher had said agents were 3 minutes out when the call dropped. That was 4 minutes ago. Maybe 5. Any second now. He's clean. Marcus's voice was gravel and cigarettes. No wire. Then he's bluffing. But Veronica's voice wavered. He has to be bluffing. You want to find out? Julian asked softly. You want to risk it? Because here's what happens if I'm not bluffing. The FBI is already downstairs. They're already moving on your accounts. And right now, they're deciding whether to charge you with embezzlement or add kidnapping, witness intimidation, and conspiracy charges. Your choice depends entirely on what happens in the next 60 seconds. You son of a... The penthouse's main door exploded inward. Not the elevator, the door. Battering ram. Tactical entry. FBI. Everyone on the ground. Now. Christopher's voice, amplified by adrenaline and authority. Tactical lights swept the room. Julian saw them through his closed eyelids, bright enough to register as flashes of gray in his darkness. Footsteps, dozens of them, tactical boots hitting marble in synchronized chaos. Veronica Whitmore, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and witness intimidation. I want my lawyer. Veronica's screech was pure panic. I'm not saying anything without my lawyer. That's your right. Marcus Chen, you're also under arrest for assault and conspiracy. Drop her. Drop her now. Marcus. Releasing Naomi. Julian heard her body hit the floor with a sickening thud, heard her groan, alive, conscious, fighting the sedative. Julian was moving before conscious thought caught up, dropping to his knees, his hands searching until they found Naomi's face. I've got you. You're safe. I've got you. Julian? Her voice was slurred, confused. Were you really wearing a wire? No. He found her hand, squeezed it. I was bluffing. Her laugh was weak but genuine. Insane. You're completely insane. Maybe. But it worked. Around them, controlled chaos. Veronica being read her rights, her protests growing more desperate and shrill. Marcus being restrained, silent and compliant now that the game was over. Agents securing the scene, calling for medical, processing what was now a federal crime scene. Christopher crouched beside them. Ambulance is 2 minutes out. How is she? Drugged. Scared. But alive. Julian didn't release Naomi's hand. Her family? Safe. Already in protective custody. No gas leak. We intercepted Marcus's associate at the airport. Christopher's voice was grim. Jules, you took a hell of a risk with that bluff. I know. If she'd called it, if Marcus had gotten violent. But she didn't. And he didn't. Because Veronica's greatest weakness is that she's smart enough to know when she might be beaten. She had to consider the possibility that I was telling the truth. Still insane, Naomi murmured, her hand tightening in his. You're one to talk. You're the one who started this. Julian found himself smiling despite everything. Climbing fire escapes with a cut hand, breaking into federal witnesses' apartments. Your penthouse. I broke into your penthouse. Same difference. It's really not. Christopher cleared his throat. I'll just go make sure they're processing Veronica correctly. You two seem to have this under control. As his brother's footsteps retreated, Julian became acutely aware of how close he was to Naomi. He could feel her breath, smell something sweet beneath the copper tang of blood and the chemical scent of sedative, vanilla, or maybe cocoa butter. The same scent from yesterday that had seemed like warmth and simplicity. Julian? Naomi's voice was clearer now, the sedative wearing off with adrenaline's help. Why did you believe me? Last night, when I showed up bleeding and babbling about your fiancé being a criminal, why did you believe me? He considered the question. Why had he believed her? A stranger, his fiancé's best friend, making wild accusations with no verification? Your voice, he said finally. When you told me about Veronica, your voice didn't have that pitch that means people are lying. And when you talked about not being able to sleep, about feeling sick, that was real. You can't fake that kind of guilt. I was so scared you'd think I was just jealous. That I wanted what Veronica had. Did you? The question came out before Julian could stop it. Want what Veronica had? Silence. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, not what she had. Who she had. Julian's breath caught. Before he could respond, before he could process what that meant, paramedics arrived. Naomi was lifted onto a stretcher, her hand slipping from his. He tracked her movement by sound, the rattle of the gurney, the efficient voices of medical professionals, the elevator doors closing. And then she was gone, leaving Julian alone in his penthouse with the aftermath of his life exploding. The next 72 hours were a blur of depositions, interviews, and forensic accounting reports. Christopher's team tore through Veronica's life with the methodical efficiency of federal investigators who'd caught their prey. The scale of the theft was staggering. $4 million over 18 months, but that was just the beginning. Veronica had been positioning herself for the long game. Joint account set up in anticipation of marriage. Forged documents giving her power of attorney. A web of shell corporations and offshore accounts designed to drain the Prescott fortune slowly enough that it might take years to notice. She was patient, Christopher said, spreading files across Julian's desk on the third day. Most embezzlers get greedy, take too much too fast. Veronica was playing the 30-year game. Marry you, slowly transfer assets, and by the time anyone noticed, she'd be protected by spousal privilege and community property laws. And my blindness was the perfect cover. Julian's voice was flat. The disabled husband who needed help managing his finances. Don't do that. Don't make this about the accident. But it is about the accident, Chris. If I could still see. Then she would have found another angle. Predators like Veronica don't need disabilities to exploit. They create vulnerabilities where none exist. Christopher paused. Jules, she had 5 previous relationships with wealthy men. 2 ended in settlements after she claimed workplace harassment. 1 ended in a mysterious fire at his vacation home, insurance fraud suspected but never proven. She's a professional. The blindness just made you the perfect target at the perfect time. Julian absorbed this, each revelation another layer of betrayal. He thought he was in love. He'd been inventory. What about Marcus Chen? Julian asked, changing the subject before the bitterness could take root. Not your Marcus Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen, thankfully. Real name Marcus Brennan. Ex-military, dishonorable discharge, history of working private security for people who need the kind of security that operates in gray legal areas. He's cooperating in exchange for reduced charges. Giving us names, account numbers, the whole network. And the insider? The person on my staff? Christopher's silence was heavy. Julian's stomach dropped. You know who it is. Yeah. We know. Christopher exhaled slowly. Jules, it's Gordon. The name hit like a physical blow. Gordon. His assistant for 8 years. The man who'd stood by him through the accident, through recovery, through the impossible task of running a company blind. Gordon, whose voice was gravel and loyalty, whose presence was a constant in Julian's carefully controlled world. How long? Julian's voice came out hoarse. From the beginning. Before the accident, even. Veronica recruited him about 2 years ago. He fed her information, access codes, helped her forge biometric authorizations. The helicopter crash was? Christopher paused. Jules, they're looking into whether the crash was actually an accident. The room tilted. Julian gripped his desk, knuckles white. What? The NTSB report cited mechanical failure, but there were anomalies. Gordon was the one who arranged that charter, who picked that specific company. If he had motivation to incapacitate you. To make me more vulnerable. To make the blindness permanent. Julian's voice was ice over rage. Gordon tried to kill me. We don't have proof yet. But we're investigating. If we can prove it. Christopher let the implication hang. Attempted murder. Conspiracy. Life in prison. Where is he now? Arrested this morning. He's in federal holding. Jules, I know this is. I want to see him. Julian stood, his voice absolute. I want to talk to Gordon face to face. That's not a good idea. Your lawyers would advise. I don't care what my lawyers advise. That man tried to kill me, then spent 6 months helping my fiancé rob me while I was blind and helpless. I want to look him in the eye, Julian's voice cracked. I want to face him. Christopher was quiet for a long moment. Okay. But I'm going with you. And Jules? If he admits to sabotaging the helicopter, if he confirms it wasn't an accident, you need to be prepared for what that means. What does it mean? It means your blindness wasn't just bad luck or tragedy. It means someone deliberately took your sight because you were too dangerous with it. And Jules? Christopher's voice was soft, sad. That means you might actually have a chance of getting it back. The federal holding facility was all harsh fluorescent lights. Julian could sense them buzzing overhead, feel the artificial brightness that did nothing to penetrate his darkness. Christopher guided him through security, through corridors that smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation, into a small room that echoed with emptiness. He's on the other side of the glass, Christopher said. Shackled. 2 guards. You're completely safe. Safe. Julian almost laughed. He hadn't been safe for 2 years. Maybe longer. A door opened on the other side of the glass. Julian heard it, tracked the sound. Shuffling footsteps. The clink of chains. A chair scraping. And then Gordon's voice, familiar and foreign at once. Mr. Prescott. I wondered if you'd come. Julian sat slowly, carefully, in the chair Christopher guided him to. He oriented toward Gordon's voice, toward the sound of breathing he'd trusted for 8 years. Gordon. Julian kept his voice level. Or is that even your real name? It is. Gordon Hayes. That part, at least, was real. A pause. If you're here for an apology, I'm here for the truth. Did you sabotage the helicopter? Silence. Long enough that Julian thought Gordon might refuse to answer. Then, yes. The word was simple, final. No elaboration. No justification. Just yes. Julian's hands clenched into fists under the table. Why? Money. Veronica offered me $500,000 to make you more vulnerable. The plan was to cause an accident serious enough for long-term injury but not death. Permanent disability that would make you dependent on others. On her. Gordon's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing quarterly reports instead of attempted murder. The blindness was actually more than we bargained for. We'd hoped for mobility issues, maybe traumatic brain injury. But blind? That was perfect. Perfect. Julian tasted bile. You destroyed my life, and you call it perfect. Your life was never destroyed, Mr. Prescott. You still run your company. You still have your fortune. You just can't see the people who are stealing from you. A pause. Although I suppose that's changed now, hasn't it? Did Veronica love me? Ever? Julian didn't know why he asked. The answer didn't matter, not really. But he needed to hear it. Love? Gordon laughed, bitter and sharp. Veronica Whitmore doesn't love anyone but herself. You were a mark, Mr. Prescott. A very lucrative mark, but still just a mark. She saw you at that tech conference 3 years ago, did her research, realized you were perfect. Wealthy, single, no close family except a brother in law enforcement she could work around. She engineered the meeting, the courtship, the engagement. Every moment was calculated. And the accident? That was part of the plan from the beginning? Not from the beginning. But when you started talking about prenups, about asset protection. Veronica panicked. She needed you vulnerable, dependent, grateful. The accident solved multiple problems. Julian sat very still, processing. 3 years of his life. 3 years of manufactured romance, calculated intimacy, performed love. And the accident that had stolen his sight, not tragedy, but strategy. Here's what I don't understand, Julian said slowly. You were my assistant for 6 years before Veronica entered the picture. You had access, opportunity. You could have been stealing from me all along. Why wait for her? Because I'm not stupid, Mr. Prescott. Stealing from Julian Prescott while he could see? That was suicide. Your attention to detail, your memory, your ability to spot patterns, you would have caught me in days. But after the accident? Gordon's voice held grim satisfaction. You were brilliant at adapting, I'll give you that. But you couldn't see the numbers I was changing, the authorizations I was forging, the money Veronica was moving. Your blindness was the permission slip we needed. The cruelty of it, the calculated exploitation of disability, made Julian's stomach turn. But beneath the revulsion, his analytical mind was working. You said the blindness was more than you bargained for. Which means you believe it might not be permanent. Gordon's silence was telling. The doctors told me the optic nerve damage was irreversible, Julian continued. But you sabotaged the helicopter. You controlled which medical team responded, which hospital I went to, which doctors evaluated me. Gordon, did you make sure I'd stay blind? I made sure you'd believe you'd stay blind. Gordon's voice was quiet now. The medical team I selected, the specialists who evaluated you, they weren't wrong, exactly. The damage was severe. But there were surgical options, experimental treatments. I made sure those options were never presented to you. Made sure you believed blindness was your permanent reality. Have you ever wondered how many opportunities we miss because someone convinced us they didn't exist? What would you do if you discovered your limitations were someone else's lies? Tell us in the comments. The room spun. Julian gripped the table, his knuckles white. 2 years. 2 years of darkness, of adaptation, of accepting a limitation that might have been treatable. 2 years of Gordon filtering his medical information, selecting his doctors, managing his care. There's a surgeon, Gordon continued, and Julian heard something that might have been regret in his voice. Dr. Sarah Chen at Johns Hopkins. She specializes in optic nerve regeneration using stem cell therapy. Experimental, risky, but your damage is, within the range of potentially treatable cases. I made sure her name never came up in your consultations. Julian couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The possibility of sight, stolen not by the accident but by the aftermath. The possibility of seeing again, hidden by the man he'd trusted to help him navigate blindness. Why are you telling me this now? Julian's voice was barely a whisper. Because I'm going to prison for the next 20 years minimum. Because Veronica's already making deals, throwing me under the bus to save herself. Because... Gordon paused. Because maybe I'm not completely without conscience. You were a good boss, Mr. Prescott. A decent man. You didn't deserve what we did to you. And if there's a chance you can undo even part of it, you should have that chance. Julian stood abruptly, his chair scraping. Christopher's hand was immediately on his arm, steadying him. We're done here, Julian said. Mr. Prescott, Julian. Gordon's voice stopped him at the door. The woman. Naomi. She's not like Veronica. Whatever you're thinking about her, whatever might be developing, she's genuine. I watched her during the wedding planning. She hated every second of being part of Veronica's scheme. She tried to back out 3 times. Veronica threatened her family each time. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve one honest thing in your life. And because I owe you at least that much truth. Christopher drove Julian home in silence, letting him process. When they pulled into the parking garage, Julian finally spoke. Get me everything on Dr. Sarah Chen. Her research, her success rates, her availability. Jules, Gordon could be lying. Trying to give you false hope as some kind of twisted penance. He's not lying. I could hear it in his voice. Julian's hands clenched. Chris, there might be a chance. Even a small one. I have to try. Okay. I'll make calls. Christopher paused. And Jules? Naomi's been asking about you. She's called the office 6 times, left messages with Mrs. Chen. She wants to see you. Julian's chest tightened. Naomi. The woman who'd risked everything, who'd said not what she had. Who she had. The woman whose voice made him want to hear her speak again, whose hand in his had felt like an anchor in chaos. I can't see her, Julian said quietly. Not yet. Not until I know, not until I figure out what comes next. You're scared. Not a question. Christopher knew him too well. I'm terrified. Chris, I don't know how to trust anymore. Veronica was a lie. Gordon was a lie. What if, he stopped, unable to voice the fear. What if Naomi is a lie too? Christopher finished softly. Jules, she's not. I've been investigating her background. Clean record, works 2 jobs, elementary school teacher and weekend shifts at a bookstore. Sends money home to her sister every month. No connection to Veronica beyond college friendship, and even that was strained. Veronica used her, manipulated her, threatened her family when she tried to back out. Naomi's not playing an angle. How do you know? Because I've been doing this for 15 years, and I know what guilt looks like. What genuine remorse sounds like. Naomi Clark spent the last 6 months hating herself for being complicit in Veronica's scheme. She finally broke because she couldn't live with it anymore. That's not strategy, Jules. That's conscience. Julian wanted to believe it. Wanted to trust that someone in this nightmare had been genuine. But trust felt like a luxury he could no longer afford. Tell her I'll reach out when I'm ready. And when will that be? When I figure out who I am now. Blind Julian. Potentially not blind Julian. Betrayed Julian. Survivor Julian. He laughed bitterly. I don't even know anymore. You're still you, Jules. The accident, the betrayal, it doesn't change the core of who you are. Brilliant. Stubborn. Occasionally reckless when you're defending people you care about. Christopher's voice softened. You bluffed Veronica without a wire. You took down a criminal conspiracy while blind. You're still the most formidable person I know. Dr. Sarah Chen's voice was crisp, professional, and carried a hint of Singapore in its cadence. Julian sat in her office at Johns Hopkins. Christopher had made the introduction, expedited the consultation, called in every favor owed to make this happen fast. Mr. Prescott, I've reviewed your medical records. The records you actually have, not the filtered versions your former assistant provided. Her distaste was palpable. I'm cautiously optimistic. The optic nerve damage is severe, but not completely severed. There's been atrophy from lack of use, but stem cell therapy combined with nerve grafting could potentially restore partial sight. Partial. Julian focused on the word. Define partial. Best case? 70 to 80% restoration. Enough to read, recognize faces, navigate independently. Worst case? No improvement. The surgery itself carries risks, infection, complete permanent blindness, even death, though that's rare. Middle ground? Partial restoration with some permanent deficits. Peripheral vision loss, reduced night vision, that sort of thing. Success rate? In cases similar to yours, we've seen about 60% achieve some level of restoration. 40% see no improvement or complications. 60%. Better odds than Julian had expected. Worse than he'd hoped. Time frame? Surgery would be in 3 stages over 6 months. Initial stem cell implantation, followed by nerve grafting, followed by rehabilitation. Total recovery time, assuming success, about a year. A year. 52 weeks of surgeries, recovery, uncertainty. 52 weeks of hoping and potentially being disappointed. And if I do nothing? Then you remain blind. But Mr. Prescott, you should know, this window won't stay open forever. The longer the optic nerve remains damaged, the less likely successful regeneration becomes. If you're going to try this, it should be soon. Julian sat in silence, weighing possibilities. Sight versus safety. Hope versus acceptance. The person he'd been versus the person he'd become. I need time to think. Of course. But not too much time. Dr. Chen's chair creaked as she stood. Mr. Prescott, may I speak candidly? Please. I've read about what happened with your fiancé. The embezzlement, the conspiracy. I know this surgery decision isn't just medical, it's about trust. Trusting doctors again after being deceived by medical professionals. Trusting that the possibility of sight is real, not another manipulation. She'd seen right through him. Julian found himself smiling despite the heavy weight in his chest. You're very perceptive, Dr. Chen. I'm a surgeon who works with patients who've lost hope. Perception is part of the job. A pause. For what it's worth, I have no connection to your former assistant or Veronica Whitmore. My only agenda is giving you back what was taken from you, if possible. The choice is yours, but it should be an informed choice based on real options, not fear. After the consultation, Christopher drove Julian back to Boston in silence. The city sounds drifted through the open window, traffic, voices, life continuing oblivious to Julian's internal crisis. What are you going to do? Christopher finally asked. I don't know. Julian pressed his palms against his eyes, a habitual gesture that accomplished nothing. If the surgery works, I get my sight back. I can run my company without constantly proving myself. I can see faces again, read expressions, know when people are lying without having to analyze vocal patterns. But what if it doesn't work? What if I go through 6 months of surgeries and end up exactly where I am now, except having wasted a year hoping for something that was never going to happen? What if? He trailed off. What if you've built a life blind, and getting your sight back means dismantling everything you've learned? Christopher finished gently. Jules, there's no wrong answer here. There is, though. Because whatever I decide affects more than just me. The company, the board, the thousands of employees who depend on Prescott Technologies. If I pursue the surgery, I'll be less available for months. If I don't, I'm choosing to remain disabled when there might be an alternative. Or, Christopher said quietly, you're choosing to live your life on your terms, not defined by what you've lost but by what you've built despite it. Julian turned toward his brother's voice. When did you get so philosophical? I have my moments. The smile was audible in Christopher's voice. But Jules, seriously, you don't have to decide right now. Think about it. Talk to people you trust. Maybe even talk to Naomi. Why Naomi? Because she risked everything to give you truth when everyone else was lying. Because she's called 17 times now, and she's not asking about the case or the investigation. She's asking if you're okay. Christopher paused. And because I think she might be the one honest thing you have right now. Julian made it 4 days before he stopped avoiding Naomi's calls. On the 5th day, he finally answered when his phone rang. Julian? Her voice was breathless with relief. I've been trying to reach you. I know. I'm sorry. Things have been complicated. I understand. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. After everything with Veronica and Gordon, and the investigation. She trailed off. Are you okay? Was he okay? Julian almost laughed. He was blind, betrayed, facing the possibility of restoration that might be false hope, and talking to a woman who made his chest tight with feelings he didn't trust. Define okay, he said instead. Fair point. He heard her smile. Julian, I know I'm probably the last person you want to talk to right now. I was part of Veronica's world, part of the whole mess. But I need to see you. There are things I need to say, and I need to say them to your face. Naomi, please, just give me an hour. If you never want to see me again after that, I'll respect it. But I need to do this. Against his better judgment, against every instinct screaming at him to protect himself, Julian heard himself say, tomorrow. 2 o'clock. My penthouse. Thank you. I'll be there. After he hung up, Julian sat in the silence of his study, wondering if he was making another mistake. Wondering if trusting Naomi was just another version of trusting Veronica, wanting so badly to believe in someone that he ignored the warning signs. But Gordon's words echoed in his mind, she's genuine. Whatever you're thinking about her, whatever might be developing, she's genuine. Could he trust Gordon's assessment? Could he trust anything from the man who'd tried to kill him? Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. Julian tracked her by her distinctive footsteps. "Mr. Prescott, you have dinner in 10 minutes. And if I may." She paused, uncharacteristically hesitant. "You may." That young woman, Naomi. She's been through quite an ordeal. Whatever you're planning to say to her tomorrow, perhaps consider that she's been carrying guilt and fear for months. She did the right thing when it mattered most. That counts for something. "Even Mrs. Chen is Team Naomi now," Julian muttered. "I'm Team Julian, sir. Always have been. And Team Julian means supporting what's good for you. That girl is good for you. I can tell." "How? How can you tell?" "Because when she looks at you, she doesn't see a blind man or a billionaire or a CEO. She sees Julian. Just Julian. And she likes what she sees." After Mrs. Chen left, Julian sat with those words, turning them over in his mind. She sees Julian. Just Julian. When was the last time anyone had seen just him, without the wealth or the disability or the corporate power coloring every interaction? The next afternoon arrived too quickly. Julian dressed carefully, not the designer suits he wore for board meetings, but simple clothes. Jeans, a cotton shirt, no tie. If Naomi was going to see him, she'd see him as he actually was, not the polished performance of Julian Prescott, CEO. At 1:58 p.m., the elevator chimed. Julian tracked Naomi's footsteps as she entered, tentative, nervous. She stopped about 8 feet away. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Julian gestured toward the sitting room. "Would you like to sit?" "Actually, I'd rather stand. If that's okay." "Of course." More silence. Then Naomi took a breath, and the words came out in a rush. "I need to apologize. Not just for being part of Veronica's scheme, but for how long I stayed silent. I knew something was wrong 6 months ago, maybe longer. But I told myself it wasn't my business, that I was imagining things, that Veronica wouldn't really hurt anyone. I made excuses because it was easier than standing up to her. And you paid the price for my cowardice." "Naomi, please, let me finish. I need to say this." She took another breath. "My sister, Keisha, she's all I have. Our parents died when I was 19 and she was 13. I raised her, put her through school, helped her with my niece when she got pregnant at 18. We've survived on nothing, on hope and stubbornness and refusing to give up. When Veronica threatened them, threatened my baby niece." Her voice cracked. "I'm not making excuses. There are no excuses for staying silent while someone you care about is being hurt. But I need you to understand why it took me so long. Why I was so scared." Julian heard the tears in her voice, the raw pain of confession. Every instinct told him to go to her, to offer comfort. But he stayed where he was, listening. "I also need you to know that I'm not here because I want anything from you. I don't want money, or a job, or connections. I don't want you to feel obligated to me because I told the truth. I need you to know that someone in this whole mess actually cared about you as a person. Not as a mark, not as a billionaire, not as a convenient target. As Julian." There it was again. Just Julian. "When did you know?" Julian asked quietly. "About Veronica, I mean. When did you realize what she was doing?" "The night of your engagement party. 4 years ago." Naomi's voice was barely a whisper. "I was helping her get ready, and she got a call. She thought I couldn't hear, but I did. She was talking to someone about access codes, about account numbers. About how the blind boyfriend would never notice a few missing millions. I confronted her after, and she told me I'd misheard. That I was being paranoid. She's very good at making you doubt yourself. But you didn't doubt yourself. Not really. No. But I doubted I had the strength to fight her. Veronica she's like a force of nature. Beautiful, charming, ruthless. She collects people, uses them, discards them. I've watched her do it since college. I was just too weak to stop being collected." Julian moved then, tracking her voice until he was standing a few feet away. He could feel her presence, hear her breathing. "You're not weak, Naomi. Weak people don't risk everything to tell the truth. Weak people don't climb fire escapes with bleeding hands to warn someone they barely know. Weak people don't stand up to someone who threatened their family. I should have done it sooner. Maybe. But you did it when it mattered most. That counts." He heard her breathe in sharply, like his words had hit a tender place. Then, so quietly he almost missed it. "Why did you let me stay that night? After I showed you the evidence, after I told you everything, you could have called security, had me arrested for breaking in. Instead, you gave me a place to stay. Protected me. Why?" Julian considered the question. Why had he trusted her? Why, after being betrayed by everyone close to him, had he believed a stranger? "Your voice," he said finally. "When you told me about Veronica, about the theft, your voice was shaking. Not with deception, but with fear and guilt and determination. I've learned to read people by sound, by breathing patterns, by the tiny tells voices give away. And your voice told me you were terrified but telling the truth anyway. That's not manipulation. That's courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. Julian smiled slightly. I also know what guilt sounds like. You've been carrying it for months. No one carries that kind of burden over a lie. They carry it over truth they're too afraid to speak. Naomi laughed, shaky and breathless. You know, it's really unfair that you can read people so well while being blind. The rest of us need to see faces to figure out when someone's lying. Blindness teaches you to pay attention to everything else. The things most people miss because they're too busy looking. Silence fell again, but this time it was different. Comfortable. Almost intimate. Julian, Naomi said softly. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why haven't you been answering my calls? These last few days, I've been leaving messages, but you haven't responded until yesterday. Did I do something wrong? He heard the vulnerability in the question, the fear that she'd somehow failed him again. No. You did everything right. Julian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. I've been avoiding you because I don't know how to trust anymore. Everyone I trusted betrayed me. And you came into my life in the middle of chaos, and you feel like something real, something genuine. But I'm terrified that I'm wrong. That I'm seeing, or not seeing, what I want to instead of what's actually there. I'm real, Naomi whispered. Julian, I'm so real it hurts. Every feeling I have when I'm around you, every thought, it's all real. His breath caught. What feelings? He heard her move closer, one step, two. Now she was within arm's reach. He could smell that scent again, vanilla and cocoa butter, warmth and simplicity. Feelings that started months ago, when I first met you, she said quietly. Feelings I tried to ignore because you were Veronica's fiancé, because it was wrong, because I had no right. But they didn't go away. They got stronger every time I saw you, every time I watched Veronica manipulate you while you were nothing but kind to her. Every time I saw the man you really are beneath the wealth and the disability and all the surfaces. Julian's hands clenched at his sides, fighting the urge to reach for her. Naomi, I can't. I don't know if I can trust what I'm feeling right now. What if it's just gratitude? Or trauma bonding? Or what if it's real? She was so close now he could feel her warmth. What if we both feel something genuine, and we're both too scared to admit it because we've been burned? I was engaged to your best friend, Julian said desperately. A week ago, I was planning to marry her. You were planning to marry a lie. A performance. Someone who never really existed. Naomi's voice was gentle but firm. I'm not asking you to feel something right now. I'm not asking for anything except honesty. Do you feel something when I'm around? Something that scares you because it's real? Julian's analytical mind scrambled for logical reasons, rational explanations. But his heart, his treacherous, wounded heart, knew the truth. Yes, he admitted. From the first time you spoke, when you said everything felt wrong. Your voice did something to me. Made me want to hear more. Made me want to trust you even when trusting anyone was the stupidest thing I could do. He heard her breathe in sharply. Then, tentatively, her hand found his. Small, warm, the calluses he remembered from their first meeting. I'm terrified too, she whispered. Terrified you'll think I'm just another person trying to use you. Terrified these feelings aren't real, they're just crisis and adrenaline. Terrified that I'll hurt you somehow, even accidentally. So what do we do? Julian tightened his grip on her hand. How do we figure this out? Slowly. Carefully. Honestly. She squeezed back. No secrets, no games, no manipulation. Just two people trying to see if something real can grow in the aftermath of something terrible. I can work with that. Julian found himself smiling, a real smile, not the careful performance he'd worn for months. But Naomi? There's something you need to know. Something that might change things. What? There's a possibility I could get my sight back. Surgery. Experimental, risky, but possible. I'm still deciding whether to try. Silence. Then, carefully, do you want to see again? I don't know. I've built a life blind. I've learned to navigate, to lead, to function. Getting my sight back means becoming someone different again. And I'm not sure who that person is. Whether you can see or not doesn't change who you are, Naomi said firmly. It doesn't change the man who runs a billion-dollar company blind, who stood up to his fiancée without flinching, who protected me even when he had no reason to trust me. Sight or no sight, Julian, you're still you. The conviction in her voice, the absolute certainty, made something tight in Julian's chest finally loosen. Stay, he said suddenly. For dinner. Let's figure out this slowly and carefully thing. starting with a meal and actual conversation that isn't about criminal conspiracies. He heard her smile in her voice. I'd like that. But Julian? I have one condition. What's that? You have to let me cook. Because I've seen your kitchen, and I'm betting you haven't actually used it in months. Julian laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. You'd win that bet? Mrs. Chen handles all the cooking. Then let me handle tonight. I make a mean jerk chicken and rice and peas. Family recipe. You don't have to. I want to. Let me do something for you that's not about crisis or investigation or fixing problems. Let me just cook you dinner. And Julian, who'd spent months accepting help because he had no choice, who'd learned to let people do things for him out of necessity rather than kindness, found himself saying yes. Naomi took over Julian's pristine, barely used kitchen with the confidence of someone who'd learned to cook out of necessity and turned it into love. Julian sat at the kitchen island, tracking her movements by sound, the rhythm of knife on cutting board, the sizzle of chicken in a pan, the bubbling of rice, the rich scent of spices filling the air. Tell me about your sister, Julian said. Keisha, right? Yeah. Keisha. Warmth flooded Naomi's voice. She's 25 now, working as a nurse in Atlanta. Single mom to my niece, Nia, who's 9 going on 30. Smart as a whip, that kid. Wants to be a doctor. Must be hard, being so far away from them. It is. But Boston has better opportunities for teaching jobs. I send money home, visit when I can. We make it work. A pause. They're safe now, right? The FBI really has them protected? Christopher has agents watching them around the clock. Veronica's people can't get anywhere near them. I promise. He heard Naomi exhale slowly, relief evident. Thank you. For that. For everything. You don't have to thank me, Naomi. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. Marrying Veronica would have been. He trailed off, unable to articulate the disaster it would have been. Would have been legal and financial hell, Naomi finished. Once you were married, extracting yourself would have cost you millions more than she already stole. Not to mention the scandal, the media attention, the ammunition it would give your board for removing you. You've thought about this a lot. I've thought about you a lot. The admission came quietly, followed by the sound of a spoon stirring. More than I should have. More than was appropriate when you were engaged to someone else. Julian's fingers tightened on the counter. When did it start? These feelings you mentioned. Silence, except for cooking sounds. Then, the engagement party. 4 years ago. You probably don't even remember, why would you? But Veronica was holding court, showing off her ring, and you were standing to the side, looking lost. Like you couldn't quite figure out how you'd ended up in the middle of this performance. I brought you a drink, and you smiled and said thank you like it was the kindest thing anyone had done all night. And I thought, this man doesn't belong with someone like Veronica. He's too genuine. Julian did remember. Vaguely. A woman with a kind voice bringing him whiskey when he'd been drowning in Veronica's social maneuvering. He hadn't known it was Naomi, hadn't asked her name, hadn't paid attention beyond the brief moment of gratitude. I'm sorry I didn't notice you then. Really notice you. You had no reason to. I was just the friend of your fiancé. Background noise. She paused. But after the accident, when Veronica started bringing me to help with wedding planning, I saw you differently. Saw how you'd adapted, how strong you were. Saw Veronica's mask slipping when she thought you couldn't see. And I fell for you piece by piece, meeting by meeting, while hating myself for it. Why hate yourself? Because you were taken. Because my feelings were inappropriate. Because watching Veronica manipulate you while I stayed silent made me complicit in hurting you. The sounds of cooking stopped. Julian, I should have told you the truth years ago. Before the wedding planning, before the stealing got worse. But I was a coward. Or you were a woman protecting her family from a dangerous person. There's a difference. Is there? Because either way, you got hurt. Julian stood, orienting toward her voice, then slowly made his way around the island. 23 steps, learned through repetition. He stopped when he sensed her presence, warmth, breathing, that scent of vanilla. Naomi, he said quietly. If you'd told me years ago, before I could verify the truth, before I had reason to believe you, would I have listened? Or would I have dismissed you as a jealous friend making up stories? Be honest. She was quiet for a long moment. You probably wouldn't have believed me. Not without proof. Not when Veronica was so convincing. Exactly. You told me when you had evidence, when I was ready to hear it, when it would actually matter. That's not cowardice. That's strategy. You're being too kind. I'm being honest. And honesty is what we promised each other, right? No games, no manipulation. Right. He heard her turn back to the stove. Okay, honest question. Are you uncomfortable with me being here? Cooking in your kitchen, getting personal, moving too fast after everything that happened? Julian considered the question. Was he uncomfortable? Yes. But not in the way she meant. I'm uncomfortable because I like having you here too much, he admitted. Because this feels normal and comfortable and right, and I don't trust feelings that come easy anymore. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For you to ask for something, or reveal an agenda, or prove you're just another person who sees me as an opportunity. What if I see you as just a man I'd like to know better? A man who happens to be brilliant and strong and kind even after being given every reason not to be. Then I'd say you have terrible taste in men, considering the circumstances. Her laugh was sudden and genuine. Maybe. Or maybe I just see potential where you see damage. The timer went off, whatever she'd been cooking was done. Julian heard her moving, plating food, the domestic sounds of someone comfortable in a kitchen. Dinner's ready. Where do you want to eat? Formal dining room, or somewhere more casual? Living room? Julian suggested. The dining room feels too performative. Living room it is. They settled on the couch. Naomi guided him there with practiced ease, no pity or overcompensation, just simple assistance. She placed a plate in his hands, warm and fragrant. Jerk chicken at 12 o'clock, rice and peas at 3, plantains at 9. All finger-friendly if you want to skip the utensils. Julian smiled. She understood. No fuss, no embarrassment, just clear information that let him eat independently. The food was incredible, spicy, complex, rich with flavors that spoke of family recipes and love translated through cooking. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, and Julian found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in months. This is amazing, he said finally. Where did you learn to cook like this? My grandmother, before she passed. She was Jamaican, came to the States when my mom was little. Food was her love language. She couldn't always afford to give us things, but she could always feed us well. I learned by watching her, helping in the kitchen. After she died, cooking her recipes made me feel close to her. She'd be proud. This is restaurant quality. You're being kind again. I'm being honest again. There's a difference. They talked through dinner, easy conversation that flowed naturally. Naomi told him about her teaching job, her students, the challenges of urban education. Julian found himself opening up about the company, about the pressure of running Prescott Technologies blind, about the board members who questioned his competence and the employees who'd proved his doubters wrong. Do you miss it? Naomi asked suddenly. Seeing? Julian set down his plate, considering. I miss certain things. Reading physical books instead of audiobooks. Seeing people's faces. Being able to walk into a room and immediately assess it visually. But I don't miss it as much as I thought I would. The world didn't end when I went blind. It just changed. And I changed with it. Would you take the surgery? If Dr. Chen is right and there's a chance. I keep going back and forth. Part of me wants to try, wants the possibility of sight back, wants to prove Gordon didn't permanently destroy me. But another part. He paused, searching for words. Another part wonders if getting my sight back means admitting that blind Julian was somehow lesser. Like I was incomplete this whole time. You weren't incomplete. You're not incomplete now. Naomi's voice was firm. You're Julian Prescott who happens to be blind. If you get the surgery and it works, you'll be Julian Prescott who happens to be sighted. Either way, you're still you, brilliant, stubborn, occasionally reckless in defense of people you care about. You keep saying that. Still you. Like there's some essential Julian beneath the blindness and the wealth and the corporate power. Because there is. I've seen it. You were just Julian when you stood up to Veronica without flinching. When you protected me even though you had no reason to trust me. When you bluffed your way through a criminal confrontation with nothing but words and conviction. She paused. That's who you are. The rest is just circumstances. Julian found himself reaching out, his hand searching until it found hers. She took it without hesitation, her grip warm and sure. Thank you, he said quietly. For seeing that. For believing it. Always. They sat like that for a while, hands clasped, comfortable in the silence. Outside, Boston's night sounds drifted through the windows, traffic, voices, the city's heartbeat. Inside, something fragile and new was beginning to take root. Naomi, Julian said eventually. If I do the surgery, if I try to get my sight back, will you be there? Through the recovery, the uncertainty, all of it? Do you want me there? Yes. More than I should, considering we barely know each other. We know each other where it counts. And yes, Julian. I'll be there. For whatever comes next. The evening stretched into night. They talked about everything, childhoods, dreams, fears, the small details that made up a life. Julian learned that Naomi was terrified of flying, loved mystery novels, and sang in her church choir. Naomi learned that Julian had wanted to be an architect before tech, still played piano occasionally, and had a weakness for old jazz. At some point, they moved closer on the couch. At some point, Naomi's head ended up on Julian's shoulder. At some point, his arm wrapped around her waist, holding her close. "This is probably too fast," Naomi murmured. "We should slow down." "Probably." But neither of them moved. "People will talk." "Your ex-fiancé's best friend?" "The scandal." "Let them talk." Julian's voice was firm. "I'm done living my life worried about what people think. I spent 4 years engaged to a performance. I'd rather have something real, even if it's messy and complicated." Naomi tilted her head up. Julian felt the movement. "You can't even see me. How do you know this is real?" "Because I can hear your heartbeat. It's racing. And mine is too. Because your breathing changes when we get close. Because every time you laugh, something in my chest gets tight. I don't need sight to know that's real." He felt her breathe in sharply. Then, so quietly, "Julian, I want to kiss you. But I need you to tell me it's okay. That I'm not taking advantage of the situation, or moving too fast, or—" He silenced her by cupping her face with both hands, learning her features by touch. The curve of her cheek, the line of her jaw, the softness of her lips. "It's more than okay," he whispered. When she kissed him, it was gentle at first, tentative, questioning. But Julian responded with certainty, pulling her closer, deepening the kiss. This wasn't performance or strategy or manipulation. This was real, messy and complicated and terrifying and perfect. They broke apart, breathless. "Wow," Naomi whispered. "That was—" "Yeah." Julian's voice was rough. "It was." His phone rang, shattering the moment. "Christopher." Julian almost didn't answer. But his brother never called this late unless it was important. "Chris? What's wrong?" "Jules, we have a problem. A big one." Christopher's voice was tight with urgency. "Veronica made bail. Posted by an anonymous benefactor. We're trying to track it now." "But Jules, that's not the worst part." "What's the worst part?" "She's in the wind. Ankle monitor cut off, handler can't locate her. We have units searching, but—" Christopher paused. "Jules, she left a message with her lawyer. Just 2 words, he's next." Julian's blood turned to ice. "Meaning me." "Meaning you. We're sending protective detail to your location now. Don't leave the penthouse, don't answer the door for anyone except agents with proper credentials." "And Jules?" Christopher's voice was grim. "Keep Naomi with you. If Veronica knows she's there." The line went dead. Julian turned toward Naomi, his face grim. "We need to get you to a safe room. Now." "What's happening?" "Veronica's out. And she's coming for us." Before Naomi could respond, the lights went out. All of them. Simultaneously. The emergency backup didn't kick in. And in the sudden darkness, Julian heard it, the distinctive sound of the private elevator activating. Someone with access codes was coming up. Someone who wanted them blind. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next.